what is happening in Russia, and were you indeed subjected to a propaganda picture of the Russian Federation?
Well, I think first of all, people need to understand the following. I would not have been allowed to do what I did in Russia if the Russian government didn't approve of it. So let's just be straight up and honest about it. I was on a book tour with the major publishing, house in Russia, Komsomolskaya Pravda, and they don't become the major publishing house in Russia by publishing works of people that the Russian government disagrees with, has problems with. I also wouldn't, I mean, one of the reasons why I was in Russia is that there was demand for me to be in Russia. It's not as though I woke up one morning and said, I'm going to impose myself on the Russian people. I was in Russia because there was a demand for me to come to Russia. And that demand was answered by a private Russian citizen. If someone had told me this ahead of time, I would have been very skeptical. Because I actually thought that Komsomolskaya Pravda was footing the bill and that they were getting assistance from the Russian government, which is why I insisted that if I go to Russia on a book tour, if I go to Russia, it has to be part of a book tour. Right. Because, for instance, if I was going to do a book tour here in the United States, let's say my book was published by Simon and Schuster, Simon and Schuster would foot the bill. That's what major publishing houses do. They foot the bill. They do your travel to and fro. They put you up in hotels. They pay for your meals. They pay for the expense of getting you to the interviews, etc. That's what publishing houses do. So I was under the impression that this is what was happening, and that the guy who sponsored this was simply a figurehead fronting for a larger government-affiliated, structure, which is okay because it's a book tour. I got there and found out that that is not what was happening, that this was an honest-to-God private initiative. This guy, Alexander Zerionov, was watching me on YouTube, probably watched me on your channel, watched me on other things, and went, I like this guy. And he heard me talk in pleasant ways about Russia. And he said, I want to bring you to Russia. And he sent me and I wrote about this in the first article. He sent me a letter. He's the director general or director of an organization called the Investment Development Agency of Novosibirsk region. It's a quasi-governmental, it's sort of a nexus between the government and private industry. He operates in that gray zone. His job is to attract business to Novosibirsk and then cut through the bureaucracy to make it easy for the business to get set up. He's a one-stop shop to, bring in business, bring in investment, and move it around. He's the most successful investment development agency in Russia. He was invited to go to the St. Petersburg, International Economic Forum and give classes on why he's so successful. He makes money. He's not an oligarch by any means. I'm sure he gets paid well. It's none of my business what he gets paid. But what I do know is that he funded this whole thing himself. And I found out halfway through the trip, and had I known this going in, there would not have been a trip. He sold an apartment. He sold his apartment to do this. Now he's building a house, so it's not like he's going to be homeless.
Yeah.
But he sold his apartment. How many people out there listening right now would say, "Yep, I'm willing to sell my apartment, sell my house to bring a complete stranger over to show him the country for a month"? There are not too many people out there who did. He did it. The other thing I found out is, far from the well-oiled propaganda machine that I was expecting, by the way, I was expecting Komsomolskaya Pravda to be leading me through and showing me things. We agreed on an itinerary, and he had made some phone calls saying, "Hey, if Scott Ritter comes, will you guys agree to do this, that, and the other thing?" And people were like, yeah. But everybody said, "Who are you to invite Scott Ritter? And why would Scott Ritter ever agree to come to Russia? Because you invited him." Nobody believed this was going to happen. He didn't actually, he prepared for it, but I didn't believe it was going to happen until I actually landed in Novosibirsk. And I think that's when he realized that, holy cow, this is happening. He's here. He was happy, but then he had to call people up and saying, all right, Ritter's here. And they're like, what? No, 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 no. There's no way he's here. You're lying. You're making it up. And then we take a selfie and send it to him. They're like, oh, geez. And now everybody's jumping through the hoops. So if this was a well-oiled propaganda tour, it was the most chaotic thing I've ever seen, because Alexander Zurianov lived on his cell phone making the next event happen. He lined something up. We were doing it, and then he's calling the next guy going, Ritter's really here. Ritter's really here. You have to deliver. You said you were going to do this. We need to line it up. And then they'd line it up, and then I'd go there. And that's what we did. And it was very heartfelt what he did, but it wasn't government sponsored. First of all, let me basically put people on notice that while Alexander Zurianov is a patriot, I would call him a hyper patriot. He loves Russia. Believes in Russia, and is dedicating his life in the service of Russia. He's nobody's fool, and he's nobody's tool. This is a man that has a very strong opinion on a lot of things, and I would imagine that some of his opinions rub people higher up in the wrong way. This is one of the most capable individuals I've ever met in my life, regardless of nationalities. He's hardworking, high energy, very motivated. Just an all-around good guy. But, he showed me the Russia he wanted to show me, not what somebody told him to show me. Right. He decided that, I would come into Novosibirsk and he would introduce me to the culture. I mean, I'm writing about it now, what happened in Novosibirsk, but the tour of the opera house by the man who runs the opera house, the largest opera house in Russia, by the way. And I'm getting the tour by the man, not because the government asked the guy to do it, but because Alexander Zurianov called up and said, hey, I got an American here who likes Russia. And, he has written about, Russian culture and stuff. And I really think we need to show him the opera house the right way. And through the strength of his argument, we got the tour lined up. But we would also just meet people and sit down and talk to people. That was the beauty of this tour. So anybody thinks that I was being led around as a propaganda exercise, frankly speaking, you just don't know what you're talking about at all. This was an extensive tour, 26 days. It was an expensive tour. I still don't know how I know how he did it. I don't understand why he did it, because this was not a money-making venture for him. It's not like this was a business deal and he and I signed contracts at the end. This was literally him bankrolling a gamble. He didn't know me from Boo. He saw me on YouTube, but I mean, I could be a different, you don't know me, Mike. Right now we're having a little bit of rapport here, but when we hang up, I might be the meanest SOB the world's ever seen, the most cantankerous person, awful and all that stuff. You don't know that. It's a gamble when you talk. He gambled to bring me there. I'm a former intelligence officer coming to Russia at a time of great sensitivity. That's a gamble. I could still be on the payroll. There's no such thing as an ex-intelligence officer, they say. I heard that all the time in Russia, by the way. But my point is, he gambled. He put everything on the line. And his gamble paid off, not because he made money, but because I was genuinely interested in seeing Russia and genuinely interested in capturing my experience and genuinely interested in bringing this experience back to the United States to educate my fellow citizens. I said that's what I wanted to do going in. He believed me. And, and I'm doing my best to make good on that. I said this to somebody else. I'll say it to you. It reminds me of a scene from, Saving Private Ryan at the end, when the Tom Hanks character is dying, and the Matt Damon character is there, and the captain says, earn this, meaning everybody has sacrificed so much to give you this opportunity, earn this. And then at the end, it shows him at the grave, and he turns to his wife and he says, have I lived a good life? Have I been a good person? Did I earn this? And that's the question I'm going to be asking myself forever. Have I earned this? This guy put everything out there to make this opportunity happen, to give me a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to peer inside Russia from a unique perspective, not a tour, not a government-sponsored thing, to actually have the Russian people that we met open up their souls, let me in and explore without precondition, without any certainty of outcome, just to do it because they believed in me. And I have to earn this, and so I will continuously strive to earn this. But this was the most remarkable experience of my life. It's not, look, I've been involved in a lot of really cool things, and each one of them. I mean, the INF Treaty, the implementation, the 2 years I spent doing that, just wonderful. But it was work. It was a job. I got paid for it. It was my profession. I went to war, and while I'm not praising war, anybody who's been to war understands that it is just a mind-blowing spectacle, especially to have the United States going to war, what it takes to move 750,000 men and women into theater with all the equipment, set it up, and watch it execute, watch this horrible machinery go forward. It is awe-inspiring, not in a good way, but just awe-inspiring. But that was my job. That's what I got paid for. I was a firefighter, and I have to tell you, there's nothing more rewarding than saving somebody's house and then seeing the people afterwards as they realize that you just put your life on the line at 3 o'clock in the morning as a volunteer to go in and do that. But I volunteered to do that. What I'm trying to say is this journey was unexpected. This was not my job. It wasn't his job. This happened because of karma, because of two souls that are similarly inclined have happenstance coming together, and that's what makes this one of the most remarkable journeys of my life, because it wasn't meant to be. I mean, it wasn't part of my job. It wasn't part of a job description. It wasn't something that was preordained. It just happened, and it was wonderful. It was wonderful.
It's somebody once said, I don't know if it was a saint or it was a pope of the Catholic Church. I think it might have been Paul VI, that there's no such thing as a coincidence. There are only signs. So whether you call it karma, whether you call it divine inspiration, but definitely something mystical took place at this time and place at which we're experiencing. May you live in interesting times, as they say. Scott, so we know you weren't on a propaganda tour, and I knew that myself. I was watching everything on Telegram, how you were posting. It was great. But if you were to give one important takeaway to a person in the West who's been subjected to the mainstream media propaganda, especially in the last year, who's never been to Russia, doesn't know any Russians, what would be your message be as a sort of messenger of what's actually happening in Russia to a person who really has no idea what Russia is, what Russia was, and where Russia is heading?
Well, that's a tough call to say one thing. If it was just one, I would say that Russia is not your enemy. That would be the one takeaway. Russia is not your enemy. You have nothing to fear from Russia. Then we'd have to break that down into why I've come to that conclusion. But before I broke that down, the second thing that I would put in is that everything we are doing to harm Russia is making Russia stronger. That Russia today is stronger than it has ever been in its history. And that's an honest to God statement. Their economy is stronger than it's ever been. Ever been. Their military is stronger than it's ever been. Their political leadership is as firmly entrenched as it's ever been. Why? Because of everything we do. It's like they feed off of everything we do to destroy them achieves the opposite result. And so I would come back and say that this effort that we've undertaken to achieve the strategic defeat of Russia is backfiring. It's a failed policy. And so we need to be looking for a new policy. Now we go back to the first thing I said, which is Russia is not our enemy. So therefore, why are we embarking on these policies designed to bring harm to Russia, especially knowing that all we're doing is strengthening Russia? And then after that, you can just break it down even further. Russia's not our enemy. Russia could be our friend if we want to be friends. Hasn't turned their back on the West yet. They should have. Believe me, if we were in a similar position and somebody was doing to us what we're doing to them, yeah, I think we'd be hard pressed. And anybody says, well, that's just not true, Mr. Ritter. I would say, really, what was the response after 9/11 when 19 terrorists, the majority of whom were Saudi citizens, hijacked 4 airplanes and committed mass murder? We condemned the entire Muslim world. The Islamophobia that gripped America was unreal, irrational, because we felt affronted by 19 men who committed mass murder in the name of a fanatic who espoused a vision of Islam that has nothing to do with mainstream Islam. But we literally blamed all of Islam. So you're telling me now that if Russia came in and actually conspired to destroy America, to achieve the strategic defeat of America, that's the term that we use for Russia. So now Russia's policy is the strategic defeat of America, and they enacted policies designed to destroy our economy. And now, as an American, what does that mean? That means that I'm going to be unemployed. That means that my benefits are going to be gone. That means I'm probably going to be homeless. I'm going to starve. My family's going to suffer. Anybody who sits there and says, I'm pro-sanction on Russia, understand what you're saying. You want the Russian people to suffer. And okay, if you believe that, that's fine. But then remember that the Russian people know who's to blame, and they should hold them accountable. But the Russian people right now, that while they're frustrated and in some cases angry with the US government and the policies put forward by the US government and their NATO allies, the bitterness that one would expect towards the American people wasn't there. I mean, there's some people that are scratching their heads saying, I don't know what's going on with America. That's frustration. I'm talking about bitterness. I'm talking about people saying, I'm angry at Americans, so that when they see me, they go, you're to blame. Because I can guarantee you, after 9/11, many people turned around to every Muslim they saw and said, you're to blame. Islam's to blame. You know, I'm sorry, I'm just reading some comment in there by a guy who obviously wants to pick a fight. But hey, Mr. Royal Beers, I live in Delmar, New York. You can come here anytime you want. We can have this conversation face to face, or you can play Keyboard Hero and just keep typing what you type up there. But it's
amen to that.
It's your life. Do what you want to do. But the point is, the Russian people want to be friends, but the biggest thing is they want to be understood. I think there is some resentment towards the collective West for embarking on a journey designed to destroy Russia without actually understanding who the Russian people are. And I think I think at the end of the day that if we actually took the time to understand the Russians, to comprehend them, to study them, to get to know them, and we walked away from that saying, "Nah, we want to be your enemies," the Russians might not be happy with that outcome, but I think they'd respect the process. They'd say, okay, at least you gave us a shot. At least you tried to get to know us. So now we understand that we are really incompatible. But the fact is, it's very difficult to be incompatible with the Russian people because, they are us. They speak a different language. They profess a different religious, different religion. They have different history, culture, but they like the same things we like. They love the same things we love. They love the same way we love. They are humans just like we are. And they're, I think in many ways, they express it better. The Russians are very tight when you first meet them. It's a blank page. And that can be a little off-putting at times because you're like, what the hell is this person thinking? Because Americans are just the opposite. You meet me, it's like, hey man, how you doing? What's up? And the Russians are like, do you really care about the answer? You just asked me how I'm doing. And now you want me to open up and tell you how I'm doing. You want me to tell you exactly what's going on in my life. Do you really want an answer? And for the most part, Americans are like, nope, I don't want an answer. I'm just smiling and shaking your hand. Now I'm going to move on. And there's America. But the Russians are like, once you sit down with them, the Russians are like, okay, I open myself up, and there they are. Their soul. They're bearing it to you. They trust you for it. Whereas Americans, we're like, hey, you want me to open up my soul? Are you kidding? Because this smile is hiding so many problems, so much anger and sorrow, but I'm not going to share that with you because I'm hiding behind this facade of happiness. So we have different approaches, but we're the same people. We have the same pains, the same sorrow, the same suffering. We just express it a little different, but that's okay. Once you sit down and start talking with people, this comes out. And I spent a lot of time, not just talking, but listening. That's an important thing too about the Russians is take the time to listen to what you're saying, because they are a people who, again, you can't, it's a nation of 158 million. So I can't sit here and say all 158 million are exactly the same. It's not. So I'm being a little bit, generic here, but the Russian people, I think that they are not desperate, that's the wrong word, but they want to be understood.
Yeah.
They feel like history has given them a bad deal. They feel like they, first of all, there are people that struggle in many ways between a split identity. Are they European? Are they Asian? What are they? They're Eurasian. What does that mean when you're dealing with the Germans who clearly identify as European, the Chinese who are Asian, but we're Eurasian? So there's a little bit of a inferiority complex built into that. But they're not inferior. They're in many ways they are equals, in some cases superior, but they don't flaunt their superiority. But they're a great people. It's a great country. It's a great nation. Um, and this is going to get me into some trouble. They're governed by a great leadership. Now, great doesn't mean that I love everything about it. Great implies that this is a leadership that has done great things. And if you understand where Vladimir Putin started when he took over in 1999 and the state that Russia was in, this decrepit, collapsing economy with a people that lost hope in many ways for life. And look where he's taken them 23 years later with this revival, this Russian revival, this economic revival. The Russian people are proud of who they are, proud of their nation. Their nation is rebuilding. They're standing on their own 2 feet as the equals of what was the nation that defeated them, the United States. That is greatness. Now, you can disagree with Vladimir Putin. You can disagree with his policies. That, by saying he's great doesn't mean you're saying he's great. You're saying this is a man who has had a massive impact on Russia and the world, and that's why he's one of the greatest leaders of modern times. And when you have a nation that is governed by somebody with this kind of impact, you're dealing with a nation that is, we are living in historical times. I mean, I liken this sometimes to what FDR did to America, pulling America out of the Depression, out of, in getting us into World War II and emerging on the cusp of victory. You can sit here and disagree with a lot of things that FDR did, but you can't say he wasn't a great president. You can't say he wasn't a great man. Even if you disagree with him, you have to acknowledge that his impact on his country and the world was huge. It was a major impact. It was a defining impact. And that's Vladimir Putin today. The Russia that he is leading today is having a massive impact on the world. It's redefining the world. And now, if you're the United States and Europe, the journey of redefinition is going in the direction you don't want it to go, because Vladimir Putin is working with like-minded leaders around the world, Xi Jinping in China to be specific, to create a system of multipolarity where people gather together around the global table as equals, and they work together with respect with one another. And that's deviating from the era